You're watching City Channel 4, your window to our community.
Good evening. My name is Jim Throgmorton. Thank you for coming tonight to this event about Iowa City's Star Communities designation. So I have the pleasure of making a few introductory remarks, and then I'll turn things over to Brenda Nations and Carrie Fox-Rimmelhart. The City Council recently adopted a strategic plan, and that recently adopted plan indicates that we intend to foster a more inclusive, just, and sustainable Iowa City. The plan identifies 7 priorities, including, I'm going to name 5 of them: promote a strong and resilient local economy, encourage a vibrant and walkable urban core, foster healthy neighborhoods throughout the city, promote environmental sustainability, and advance social justice and racial equity. We hope to see each of these priorities reflected in everything the city does with regard to economic development, planning, transportation, housing, community relations. We hope it permeates through what we do. The STAR program itself is designed to help cities with these types of goals. It will help us establish a framework to evaluate our current state, the current state of the city, to identify future opportunities, and to measure progress. Let me provide just a little bit of background, thanks to the help of Carrie and Brenda. Along with 7 other cities, Iowa City signed on to the STAR Leadership Program last March, a year ago. Carrie Fox-Rimmelhart and Brenda Nations led our effort to collect the required data. This took several months and involved, if I understand correctly, over 100 people and over 1,000 hours of effort. Largely as a result of Carrie's and Brenda's efforts, Iowa City was certified as a 4-star community earlier this month, thereby validating our achievements with regard to sustainability. Tonight, Carrie and Brenda will discuss in detail what the STAR program is, what we did to obtain our certified 4-star rating. Hi, Rebecca, nice to see you. And what we learned along the way. They will also discuss some of the details and highlights of our final rating, which I am very pleased to say is the highest of any city in the state of Iowa. And they will indicate some of the next steps we will be taking, or maybe in the interaction with the audience, we'll hear more about the next steps. So with that, I'd like to turn things over to Brenda and hear about our 4-star rating.
Thank you, Jim. And thank everybody for coming tonight. And it's a pleasure to be able to talk about this project that we worked on for the last year. And we are happy to start bringing it out to the public. So tonight, what we're going to be discussing is what the STAR program is, why we did it, and what the benefits are from doing it. And the first part's going to be talking about the details about the STAR program, and then the second half will be more about our rating and what some of the things that we learned from it. So Iowa City published this report, the Sustainability Assessment, in 2013, and I have some extra here if anybody would like a copy. It's also online on our website. So when this was published, this happened before the STAR program actually came out and was rolled out. It just came out actually the month that this was published. And so what cities were really trying to do, other cities were trying to gain an idea of how they were doing by measurable progress, and to have numbers and good data to go with it. And so we wrote this. We were kind of making it up as we went along, and it wasn't, not all cities had the same rating system, they didn't all have the same sort of information, and so it was up to a city to kind of figure out what different things to look at. So this has 5-year trends from our data, the data that we had, and it's also compared to state and national averages. And like I said, it's on the website. And so for the 5 years that ended in, I think most of it ended in 2011. Since then, the STAR program came out, and STAR stands for Sustainability Tools for Assessing and Rating Communities. And it's really the first comprehensive framework to evaluate sustainable communities. So it was something that a lot of cities had needed to see how they were doing in different areas and to have a national framework. So what is a sustainable community? Sustainability, a lot of people define it in different ways. A lot of people think it may be mostly environmental, but usually the traditional definition of sustainability has to do with environment, with economy, and with social aspects of a community. So that really has to do with today and also into the future. So it has those three aspects and looking not just short-term, 5 years, but into the future. So Iowa City's been around for 175 years, and so we're thinking that we want to keep staying around for many years to come. And to do that, it's important to balance these three: environment, economy, and social aspects of a community. So STAR took several years to create. It started initially with the National League of Cities, the U.S. Green Building Council, and also another agency called ICLEI. And then now it's currently run by a nonprofit group under the name of STAR that's based in Washington, D.C. But over these years, it took over 200 people to create it, including local government officials, sustainability leaders, local government personnel, and a lot of technical experts too, from some of those agencies as well as federal agencies like EPA and HUD, the American Planning Association, and many other people came together to create this, and it really was created for local governments by local governments as a need that a lot of local governments saw that they wanted a format like this. I think a lot of cities think of sustainability as kind of a feel-good or a la-la thing or something like this, and there really was a need to find metrics for some of these things. So who's involved in STAR? Currently, there's over 100 cities that are involved in STAR. Actually, Iowa is a real hotspot for STAR, it seems like. We're the 5th city in Iowa to get certification, and there's other cities as well that are working on it or a abbreviated program of it. STAR just put out a news release about how so many cities in Iowa are doing STARs. Also, the state of Florida has a lot of cities and counties using STARs, but the swirly star is a certified community, and the checks are also communities that are currently working on STAR. So within environment, economy, and social, there's 7 main goal areas in the STAR program, and those are, I guess if you think of it as the environmental part is under built environment, climate and energy, and also natural systems. The economy and jobs would cover the economy, and the social aspects would be under education, arts and community, and equity and empowerment, and health and safety. So it covers all those areas, but kind of spreads it out a little bit in those main categories. These are the 7 goal areas, and underneath that, there's also 44 different categories within those. And so each of the 7 goal areas are worth 100 points that you can get credit for in your certification. And then, except for education, arts, and community is for some reason worth 70 points. And then there was also 50 points worth for innovation and process, which is not listed here. So we were looking for information in these 44 categories, and most of these categories cover a wide variety of what goes on in most communities, so it's really comprehensive. And one of the things about STAR is that they wanted a uniform rating system that could cover some cities as big as New York or LA, but also as small as Charles City, which is the 4th city in Iowa to get certified. The way that it's set up, within each of these 44 categories, there's outcomes and there's actions. And within each one of the 44 categories, outcomes are either trends, targets, or thresholds. And for example, one of the things that we looked at is to see if we were reducing the tonnage that's going into our city-owned landfill. And that was a trend, and we had to, most of the information that we had to enter was over the last 3 years. And so or sometimes further. And so we were looking to see if we were in a downward trend to what's going on in our landfill. And a lot of cities have zero waste goals and things like that, and that's one of the reasons we looked at that. A target, for example, was to see if we were on target to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by 2050. So that was a specific, not just a trend, but a specific goal. Or an outcome could also be a threshold. Like one of the things that we looked at was the transportation mode split, and one of the things we had to show was that in Iowa City that the commuters, less than 60% drive alone to work. So those were the outcomes. Usually these are worth more points. They're the more important things, and they're really like the goals that a city is trying to reach. So they were the big things to work towards. Then there were the actions. I should say there was 108 outcomes, and there was 408 actions that we looked at. And so there was actions in each of the categories, and there were 9 different categories. They range from assessments and surveys, plans, codes, policies, practices, education. You can see there a wide variety. And also we were responsible for uploading maps, and it was quite extensive. So these are our files that we collected, and just to prove that it was really data-driven. And out of all of the things that we were looking for in the whole program, it was 516 different measures. And the measures weren't just for the city government, they were also for our partners and the community, the wider communities. So we had a folder for each of these outcomes. We had to be really organized, and we had wall charts and the whole work. So we also saved everything online and had over 2,000 files by the time it was all over, all collected. We were working with over 200 people. I mean, we worked with over 100 people, maybe it was as much as 200, both city staff and all sorts of departments, and also our external partners. And so with our external partners, we got a lot of information from ICAD, who helped us with economic development. We got a lot of information from the school system, Johnson County, Kirkwood, at the University of Iowa, as well as some other external partners. So we're really thankful for the work that they helped us with. Also, we got all the information that we needed to collect from this technical guide, which is over 400 pages. Things were really specific that they asked for. So if you happen to look online and think, well, we have that, or we should have that, I had to really hit the nail on the head on what they were looking for. So some things we might have, but not quite the way that they wanted it, or we weren't collecting data in the way that they wanted it. So even though we were close, it really has to, they were really sticklers of following this technical guide so they would be consistent against all cities that are doing this. So why would we spend all these hours in collecting all this data? It's kind of crazy, isn't it? So one thing is that unless you know what kind of data you have and what you're measuring, you can't really understand where you're going or managing it. And also with sustainability, there's a lot of greenwashing and saying, you know, cities can say they're sustainable and they can say they're doing things, but it really is with having something that's so data-driven, you can really see if you're making progress or not. Also, it's a way that we can compare with similar cities of our size, other college towns, cities in Iowa, and really see how we're doing on our performance and seeing how we're doing well or how if we're falling short. So with this baseline inventory, we can really demonstrate also if we improve, and we have a baseline level now, and we can see if some of those trends are moving in different direction. And most importantly, I think it will help us prioritize where we need to focus our improvements. So the benefits to the overall community are many. First of all, I think it's really demonstrated our commitment to sustainability. I think with the 4-star rating and also being the highest in Iowa shows really that we have a lot of good things in place as a community. We are receiving national recognition for our achievement. A lot of other cities who've gone through STAR are really looking at other cities that have done it and their points and how they're doing. It's a way to gain competitive advantage and attract funding. It's supposed to be easier to get grants. Improves transparency towards our residents, and by way of letting them see what we have collected online. You can go online and see what we do have in place and what we don't. So if a resident is concerned that we're not doing something, or what we're doing, or what we have in place with policies and codes or plans, they can look it up. And not only in Iowa City, but if you live in New York or Santa Fe or Charles City. And one thing is that other cities said, and we have found too, is that it's really a way to build and strengthen partnerships. A lot of the partners that we worked with it was a really positive experience. And again, the most important thing is to identify our strengths and learn what our gaps are. I know this is hard to read, but one of the things that we learned along the way is how interconnected some of the actions and the outcomes were. And for instance, some of the actions were counted for points in different areas. Like for instance, if a city has a bike share program, it counted for active living, and also counted for different modes of transportation, and also counted in greenhouse gas, lowering greenhouse gas emissions, different things like that. And there were many things like that. And the whole thing has to do with synergies and overlapping measures. Really showed the stronger actions really had to do with more than just one of those categories. So it was really interesting to see how many things were interrelated, and looking at the community as more of a system than separate, isolated things going on around town. So after collecting all this data, we finally did get our STAR rating. After they thoroughly looked it over, they gave us back a time to redo some things and finalize our points, and then we did get our rating, which now you can find on the STAR website. And it looks like this. You can scroll down and see all the 7 goal areas, and you can see how we did and what actions that we achieved and which ones that we didn't get points for. And you can also compare the website. You compare other cities within the state. You can compare other populations. You can look and see, for instance, who might have done better in waste minimization or climate and things like that. Another thing that's really positive aspect of being a STAR community is for those areas that we might not have done well in, they have examples of best practices from other cities that they can connect you with other cities that have done those practices, and you can start finding out more information about those areas. So out of the certification levels, you wonder I didn't explain what a 4-star community is. There's 3-star ratings with the beginning of a 3-star, which is 200 to 399 points, our 4-star rating, and then the 5-star rating is 600 points, and that's out of 720 points. And I have copies of this because I know it's hard to see, and I'm going to be referring to this. So we achieved 484 points out of 720, which is it's a very good rating, and it's in the high 4-star. So very pleased with the cooperation that we got from everybody that helped, that we were able to really show what we truly have in place in Iowa, hopefully. So on this chart that you have in your hands now, one thing I just want to make clear is that with each of these 44 categories, there's a number at the bottom of the number of points that we achieved and the number of points that were possible. So I also took our final rating scores, and I ranked them according to the percentage of the points that we got. And so the darker colors are we scored higher, and going lighter to the white. So the white are the ones that we scored less than 50% in. So to explain this, some of these the things that I think jump out to some people at first are that there's a couple of these that are zeros, and you wonder what happened there, especially with environmental justice, because that's an important one to consider, an important focus area. The way the STAR program was set up is that to get points in this area, you had to go to an EPA website that's called EJ Screen. And on that, you had to look at both the areas that you have concentrated low income in a certain category. And we did that, and actually we had no place in Iowa City that ranked in that area of low income. The other thing was, of low income, actually we did have. We had low income that only was focused in the downtown area, so I think it was picking up the students. And so that's what we had for low income. And the other was ethnicity and race. And whatever the limit was for that, that's what we had. No pockets of that particular percentage that they were looking at. So after that, you had to look at different things like Superfund sites and things like that. And it was something that just really actually didn't apply to us very well, and applied to more of a city that was bigger or had Superfund sites and different neighborhoods. And the whole reason that they were trying to get at here is just not having areas that with low income or different ethnicity that ended up with all those type of environmental problems. And so we didn't really find that this was an issue for us. I looked at the city of Davenport and also Dubuque, and they didn't apply for this one either. And some of the cities in our group that we did with our leadership program also said it didn't really apply. So some of these just didn't apply just because the size of our city or different situations. Another one here is working lands, and that one just didn't really apply to us much either. And so you can see from this that there are areas that we can show improvement, but one of the things is some areas are more important than others. And so it's not like it's important to run out and try and achieve all the things that we don't have, but like prioritize. Like for instance, like we didn't score very high in ambient noise and light, and that's probably not a real big issue to most people in Iowa City, whereas something like greenhouse gas mitigation might be something that's something more important to focus on. So I think it's just looking at those and understanding what some of those mean and how they rank. Some of the things within the STAR rating system were just like spot on, and some things like that were little just didn't fit us. So okay, so now I'm going to go into this in a little more detail and talk about some of these specifics about what we have in place in Iowa City. First of all, under the goal area of education, arts, and community, we did really well in this category. In fact, we got 93% of the total points. And out of all the of all the cities that have achieved certification, there are about 50 cities now. We're the second highest scoring city of all those 50 cities. So out of all of the STAR certified cities, the higher city than us is Washington, D.C. So we got above Portland and above Seattle and above Santa Fe and Burlington, Vermont, and a lot of those other cities that are certified. So that's really impressive, I think. And if you've lived here for any amount of time, I think you can just really understand that that's probably, to me, it seems really accurate. One of the things that we looked at in this category was our school system. We have a really good school system. We scored 100% for our school system. So that was great. We have, one of the things we looked at was high graduation rates. We have really high school graduation rates, also high graduation rates for different ethnic groups. That was one of the things we had to report to. So that was really interesting and good news to find out. We also have high attendance at cultural events. If you think about all the different events that go on in Iowa City, it's most people go to something at least once a year. We also have high social and cultural diversity and did well in that category. So you can see there are a lot of, in that, on your sheet there in front of you, we did really well in most of the areas. Oddly, an area that we didn't do as well in, and which we may or may not have opportunities in, is historic preservation, which is funny that we didn't get full points in that because we were used as an example in the STAR rating as an example of a place that does it well. So some of that was had to do with, and I don't know if there's any opportunities there. Some things just may or may not fit. So anyway. Again, the arts and the culture here, a lot of it is, of course, because of the university, but a lot of it, summer of the arts that goes on in the summer are free. One of the things was that a lot of it's free and available to everybody, and that things aren't, costly and hard to get in. So I think that's a thing that we can be proud of, and that I think that's why a lot of people like to live in Iowa City. Equity and empowerment. This is, before we started STAR, this is an area that most cities said that they scored the lowest in. And so we were kind of expecting that too. And, but we didn't. We scored, out of all the 50 rated communities, we scored the third highest in this. And so in this area, we scored high in civil and human rights. We got full points for that. Civic engagement, and also for human services. A lot of that was from what the county does. So although I can say that we did well, we're the third highest, it's not to say that there's not room for improvement. At the very top of that sheet in the colored part, if you look at equity empowerment, it has our total points. And I think it's 57, is that right? So so that's 57 out of 100 points. So even though we scored really well in comparison to other cities, there's still room for improvement there, and maybe we can look at that and see if there's areas or things that we could improve on that might give us some ideas. And I already talked about the environmental justice part, and with the protocol not really fitting us. So health and safety, we did really well in this too. We were the 6th highest of certified communities. So we did really well in the safe community part. We got 100% of the scoring for that. We got points for having low numbers of violent crimes per capita. So we looked at different violent crimes, and so we did well in that. We also did well under active living, and that was for adults and for kids. Community health is great place for health and also emergency response. So I don't know, I've always felt really safe in Iowa City, and I think this really shows that we got good responses from our fire department and our police department, and I think this is something that we should feel good about. In this area, one of the opportunities that we may have is, one of the things that we look at is food access and nutrition. We looked at both food deserts and food access. Who has access to food? And one of the things that we looked at was who's within a walkable distance of a grocery store. And then we looked at the flip of that, who's further away from a grocery store and doesn't have the access to food and nutrition. And this is one of the maps that we made, the GIS maps we made using census and also the location of our healthful food outlets. And the red there shows that that area doesn't have access as much to a grocery store, and I think it has the percentage there, 16% don't live as close to a grocery store as is desirable, which amounts to, I think, 11,000 people in Iowa City. So those were interesting things to look at and to think about, too. Okay, economy and jobs. We scored the 8th highest out of the 50 communities that have done this. So actually, out of the 7 goal areas, 5 of them we scored in the top 10 of the 50 communities that are certified. So I think that's pretty impressive and gives us something to be proud of. So we looked at business retention and development in this one, which we got full points for. We also looked at our local economy, and we did really well in that. That's because our local sales have gone up. We have more new businesses, and our employment has gone up. We looked at both employment and unemployment too. A lot of this information, well, some of the information was lookup online for census data. They wanted to have something like that they can compare to cities across the country, and some of it came from local data too. So, and then we also worked with ICAD on the targeted industries area, and so you know, with the economy of being a part of sustainability, it really makes a lot of sense that if you think about you know, what people need, and if they don't have jobs or good wages, all the rest is kind of secondary if you can't feed your kids. So this was a good thing to be strong in with local economy. So as far as the opportunities, there's maybe some work that we could do in quality job and living wages. And one of the things that we put in here is that Johnson County passed a minimum wage ordinance, and so that was something that we used in the STAR rating. Okay. So built environment, I think we were 10th in this category. So one of the things is how we compare to other cities, and STAR says they're not like a ranking against other cities, but it's just human nature, I think, to look at that. Part of it is how we compare to other cities, and also how much, what our total percentage of the points that we got were to. And some of it is whether it's good information and good a look at what we really have, or also some things with STAR may not fit. It may not be a true look at that category, but some of those things we're going to look at more closely in the future. So with built environment, some of the things that we have going for us are safe drinking water. We haven't had violations in that. We also have wastewater treatment that's good, that returns water back to the river without any violations. We scored high for walkability. One of the things that we looked at was something called complete and compact communities. And what it did was it took the lead neighborhood design, and we looked at 2 areas in Iowa City. We looked at the downtown area, and we looked at the town crest area, and we looked at how close people lived from where they worked, and also how the storefronts face the street. And downtown, the stores and the streets are really close, whereas when you think about town crest, in that time of development, the parking lots are in front, and there's real big parking lots in front of the stores. It's just a different building structure. But so we looked at the sidewalks on both sides of the streets, if they were ADA accessible, looked at things really closely like that, and how those areas were planned. So for our community, in bigger communities, you have to do more areas like that. But for our population, we only had to look at 2 sections like that, which is really, I thought that was one of the most interesting things that we looked at in this. Also, you'll note that housing affordability, we scored high in that. And I have a question mark because we were really surprised. We didn't think we were going to. And and I'm looking at Carrie because Carrie did that one, and when it comes to questions, she's going to be answering some of the ones that she worked with most of the human services. Carrie is a caseworker in our housing authority at the city, and so she worked with a lot of the human services, and my background's more in science, so we kind of split it up. So when it comes to questions times, some of the things that you'll want to be asking will go directly to Carrie, and that's one of them. So she has a good answer for you, though. So that's one area we did well that we didn't expect to. Public spaces, we did well in that one also. Transportation choices, that one was really interesting, having to do with bikes, cars, different things like that. So interesting. We learned a lot about a lot of different things that we weren't aware of before. Here's our water plant. Actually, this is one of the things that we looked at in our first sustainability assessment with no citations. The things that we looked at were things like coliform bacteria, also turbidity, which is like the sediment within water. Also, they wanted to know about cryptosporidium and some other things like that. So we don't really have a problem with any of those things. So we have really good drinking water here. One of the really interesting things was the transportation mode split, and it really goes to show how walkable our community is. One of the things we found in the first sustainability assessment was that our vehicle miles traveled per capita was half the amount for the state and national numbers. The way the same thing came out in the STAR rating system was this is one of the things that we had to reach maximum or minimums. And so this we got full credit for, and we're way beyond what they wanted us to achieve. And that we have, this is the information that we got from census on people's commute to work. So we have 56.3 that drive alone. I think the limit was supposed to be on this one, I think, under 60. And then it's kind of funny how they do this. So 29.9% bike, walk, or use transit. And then it's funny that they say, and then 20% bike or walk. So I think that with our city being so walkable, and also with so many people liking to bike, and having things close to downtown, and also with the students, and that the university is adjacent to downtown, I think this is a lot of it. So that was really interesting thing that the STAR people called out too as one of the things that we exceeded. So for built environment, opportunities, housing affordability, even though we did really well in that, it's something that we're always going to be looking at. It's we're not going to let that one go, no matter how high we scored. Also, infill and redevelopment is an area that we have opportunities in, and one of the things that they called for was to have maps of your infill area and then show improvements of how those areas have been developed through time. And we didn't have that to provide. We probably had that information, but not in the format they wanted. And now we're starting to look at that. They're starting to map that. So that's something that, that we're starting to do. Okay, climate and energy. This was a big area and that we did not do well in. In fact, this out of all the 7 goal areas was the one that we did the least well, which was a little bit surprising in a way because as compared to other cities in Iowa, we have done some work. Done some work in this area. We have 6 years of consecutive greenhouse gas inventories for our community. We have climate. We've worked on climate projections. We have a flood zone ordinance. We had increase in green building certifications like LEED, and we have waste reduction programs. So that's some of the things that we have in place. We were the first city in Iowa to do our greenhouse gas inventory in 2009, and have kept it updated. Also, we have built LEED buildings, and this is our LEED Platinum Environmental Education Center. There's solar. Also, we've replaced our lights in our parking ramps with LED lighting. We've worked with 4 other cities in 4 other states in the Midwest with climatologists on finding out what our climate projections are going to be for each one of our cities in each one of our states. And I do have a handout for some of the summary of that work too here. It's also on our website. And which is important because as we know, we have increased flooding, and that was one of the things that the climatologist suggested that they used 7 different models for that information to get the information of our projections, and they are suggesting that we're going to have more flooding and more rain. So the opportunities, one thing we've got going for us is our mayor, Jim Throckmorton, just signed the Compact of Mayors, which has committed us to doing some of these things that are totally in line with the STAR program and will help us in that opportunity of moving forward in our climate work. So that's a real positive, and we've already taken steps in that direction. So important move. And the last of these is our natural systems. And with that, we've done much work in our biodiversity efforts. We have mapped green infrastructure. We've done some work in our streams. And we have a stable water supply. That was a fun one to figure out. This is an interesting map, I think, that shows how much of our land cover is covered in green infrastructure, which counts as our tree canopy area, our parks, and also green roofs. And the green roofs are small green squares that are hard to see, but we've got several of them. And so we have 41% of our land cover counts as green infrastructure. So that we didn't know before. And more than 90% of our residents live within a half mile of green infrastructure, meaning parks and things like that. So that was interesting putting that map together. I think that was the most remade map of the year. These are all our biodiversity efforts that we've been working on over the last 10 years. And we're doing some things with monarchs. We have monarch way stations. We've done stream assessments. We've been working on invasive species, but the invasive species area we didn't score very high in. Definitely need more work there. This is we have prairies and wetlands, over 1,000 acres of that, prairies, wetlands, and forest that we own, the city owns. We've assessed all of our streams with the Rascal assessment, looking at, I think there's 18 different categories, and we do stream bank cleanups. And so some of the opportunities we have are in invasive species, also natural resource protection, looking at some of our areas that we own. One of the things in this area was also had to do with water quality within your jurisdiction. So the fact that the Iowa River, we couldn't say that there's like good water quality, we didn't get any points there. So, and I already said that the working lands part didn't quite fit in, so. Okay, in summary. So hopefully you'll have seen by now is that STAR is a really robust, robust framework, and it really is, hopefully you'll see and think that it's a credible program to really understand what's going on in our city as far as sustainability efforts. And covering 44 objectives, that's a lot. And it's really kind of more, in our next steps, more than we can probably look at all at once. And some of those areas that we need to improve on is probably not going to happen next year, and some things we might choose that aren't important as other things. So I think that you'll see that we ranked high in a lot of those areas, really high, and that's something that we should really be feel good about our community. And some of the things I think that we know inherently that we live in a very creative community, safe community, some of those things. So, but now with these metrics, they really can benchmark our progress as we move forward. And we can really use this information to how we best find our need to prioritize. And so we are currently planning on a STAR workshop for city staff to kind of look at these in more detail. To be honest, this just can't, we've been working on it for so long, and it just came out in the last month. And just to really understand what it all means, I think it's going to take a while, and to look at how we're going to move forward is really going to take a lot of people and a lot of thinking about how we can best do that. So just a short thing about we're doing a follow-up. It's a pilot program with just 21 indicators that I see Eric is in the back. Cedar Rapids is doing it too, and Johnson County is doing it. And it's a shorter version of just keeping up to date of some of the really important things like water quality, safety, some of the things that are really easy to look up once a year. So I hope that you'll follow our progress. We have a sustainable newsletter that we just started in January that comes out once a month. We have a Twitter account through the city. We also try and post something on Facebook once a week. And if you have a hard time signing up for the newsletter, you go to the website under News and Media, and you have to put in your email, and it's the second, you go down, there's Sustainable News, but it's the second one you have to go down to Sustainable Newsletter. So thank you for your time, and we will take any questions now, and Carrie's going to help me answer some of the questions, and we got a microphone. We got a microphone for any of the audience who wants to ask anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda, and congratulations. This is huge. It's a tremendous amount of work, and I really love the matrix you put out because it shows us where we can improve and what we're doing well at. My question does go to affordable housing because I know it's a priority of not just our council, our current council, but many in the community, and I see we scored very high there. So maybe, Carrie, you can help us understand what went into that.
Well, I think there was a couple things. Even myself, I was very surprised. But when you, in hindsight, being in housing for 16 years, over the last 5 or 10 years, I think we've got a lot of agencies and community partners that are in place that are really advocating for those efforts. So I'm not really surprised that a lot of best practices were in place. Where we a couple of the outcomes we scored high on. One was that they asked about any project-based complexes such as Pheasant Ridge, Ecumenical. Have they opted out of their HUD contract, and what have we done in the last 3 years? Well, we haven't had any opt-outs since Cedarwood, which is 2007, Doug? Yeah. So, and at that time, we did have a plan in place. We had some money that we applied with HUD, and we gave anybody that met the eligibility criteria for a voucher. So we got the points there right away. So easy, given points. The other thing, the other item was preserving affordable housing stock. A little bit trickier, but as Brenda mentioned, we were using the 2 CCs that we picked at the start were downtown and Towncrest. And so obviously we have 2 big projects. We have Capitol House and we have Ecumenical that fall in those. And so they do large-scale projects, and so we only had to document that 10% of any of those units in comparison to all the rental permits for rentals was substantially rehabilitated. And Ecumenical just went through a humongous restructuring of all their windows and stuff, so we were able to get credit there. The other outcome measure that we didn't score on, which is probably not surprising, was the H&T index, where the cost of housing and transportation were people spending less than 45% of their income. And no. But we were pretty much in the same range as all the other 5. I actually looked those up today, the other 5 cities in Iowa. We scored very much the same. Obviously, our housing costs are more, but our transportation, the expense of transportation is less, which was attributed to more busing, biking, that they couldn't necessarily prove. So then the other things were just the action items, and those were programmatic issues. And of course, we have a lot of community organizations that are working really diligently on affordable housing. Johnson County Affordable Housing Coalition, the Housing Fellowship. We have the city manages the HUD funds for vouchers. We have the University program, which we could take credit for. GRIP, home funds, CBDG funds. So I think, while it's always a very hot topic, that also shows that we're constantly looking at it. So people are constantly advocating and working towards that.
And Carrie, when you say that one of the issues is that we have a low vacancy rate,
right, and so that's the other thing. You have to look at the tool. Thanks, Brenda. Tool. It's a tool that evaluates best practices, but what it can't take into consideration is each individual community's issues. And when you have I doubt that there's very many. I don't know, but of the 50 communities that have been certified, how many of them can have a 1% vacancy rate, which drives costs? So that's certainly looking at how that tool how the tool can fit into the issues that we have here.
Burlington, Vermont is one. They're probably not as big as a university. Lawrence is currently going through and getting rated. Columbia, Missouri is doing this. I know Fayetteville, Arkansas had, but probably there are probably not very many cities have as large of a community population of students as we do. And that's one thing that kind of skews some of our numbers in some ways, as I'm sure you know. In good and other ways. Not bad, but different.
Thank you, Brenda, and thanks for everybody that worked on this. I know how hard this was, and I know that we, down at the county, we helped you a bit on, and I thank all of our employees down at Johnson County for helping with this. This story starts a long time ago, though. About 10 years ago, you and I and a few others, maybe in this room, were involved with pushing the county and the city towards sustainability when we did the Cool Cities program, and then you were hired by the city to be to do this sustainability work and the climate modeling and work with ICLEI and stuff. So you've been at this quite a while, and we just didn't become sustainable overnight. This has been a long-term practice. At the time we started that effort, the city was already green in a lot of ways. And we were shown how that was done and how, but we were, the citizens continually prodded that. And I'm very proud of what the citizens of Iowa City have done to ask their city leaders and their civic leaders and their county leaders to continually be more sustainable. And so we should all be proud of this. We should all also be proud of how this community ends up on the top of a lot of lists of best places to live. And this rating shows that. It's in many different ways. Some of the things I might quibble with, like this affordable housing things, but I think that this will be a great way for us to market our community. I've said years ago that we were the greenest city and the most sustainable city in Iowa, but a couple other communities may have marketed themselves a little bit more greenly than we did, and some of that might have been the phrase you used earlier, greenwashing. But now I think it's on paper and it's a very thorough examination, and I think I sit on ICAD's board now, and I can't wait for us to be able to use this 4-star rating to move forward and for business retention, for recruitment, for entrepreneurial stuff, for starting a business. We know once people come to this community, they love it, and that they don't want to go anywhere else. And this is one of the ways we can prove it. So I just thank you and the city and all the city staff for putting this together. And I believe this is a tool we can use to even make our community better. So no question, just a big thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
So I ditto what Mike said, and then a couple of questions. I'm interested in the infill and redevelopment question. It seems odd to me that affordable housing is so high and infill and redevelopment is pretty low. So I'm interested in knowing, like, are there any recommendations from the STAR program folks or other places where that can help us with infill and redevelopment? I live on the southeast side of Iowa City. I would be interested to see if, the Grant Wood area, how that would score if it was that instead of Towncrest, how we would score on some of those numbers, because there's a lot of opportunity for infill and redevelopment in that area. I'm not shocked, but I'm curious about the arts and culture education aspects of it, because I see that I feel like we have a lot more opportunities to leverage our creativity in the community. So it's interesting to me that the numbers are so high.
Well, and it doesn't mean if we did well that we should stop doing well, or we should stop doing what we're doing. And the numbers are high, but if you think about other communities, I think that we have so many different opportunities to go to cultural events, and a lot of it also was, let's see, I think, is that where community cohesion is, or is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, community cohesion was a big thing. I can't see that far, it's just education.
So the other thing, was trying to show in the last year that we've had 10 different cultural events that were free and open to the public. I'm not sure that a lot of places, I felt like we were scratching even for that, really. I don't know if you can answer more about infill. We kind of tag teamed that one. That was a large learning curve for us.
Right. With the infill part, I think I said that part of it was having this map. And the map, you had to have on it designated areas that you planned to infill. And what we had was, we had a riverfront crossings map, but it didn't have each plot, each one identified as an area that could be redeveloped. And so then you're supposed to have that and then show an increase, showing that you had something before and you had something after. And so now, and we only had it for riverfront crossings too. And so that's something that we're going to be looking at, mapping what areas. And I think that part of it is we didn't want that, if we have that, to be necessarily public, because I think that, people didn't necessarily want their land to be thought of as under that category. But it's something we're going to be looking at, and that I think is an important one. And I think it's just not that we haven't done that, but just we haven't measured it in the way that they think that it should be measured. So we'll be looking at that one. I guess, Eric, Jim? Wait, after Eric, we'll get you, Jim.
Yeah, congratulations for, one, starting this process, getting the support for it, two, completing it, and three, scoring so well. At the City of Cedar Rapids, I started working as their sustainability coordinator a few months ago, and we completed the Leading Star Community Indicators Assessment, which is much abridged relative to this full assessment, but we're going to come up, I think, with some of the same questions. I'm wondering if you might offer some guidance or some of your strategy for utilizing these metrics. I'm kind of curious how you might integrate these into your existing city values and into your city's organization and plans. And, maybe particularly some of the ones that are less obviously green and sustainable oriented as many people think of the term. So things like violent crime or things like education. How do you, as the sustainability coordinator, work on some of those which may not be perceived by many people to be your direct role? So just a general question about integration of these metrics into your city's work.
Well, that's a good question. What STAR's doing now is a lot of cities want to use it to move forward, and that was one of the issues with having the first sustainability assessment. Is like, how do we use this? And so we're going to be talking to them about how to have a workshop for having them come and talk to city staff that worked on this, and like to really dive deep in some of those categories. And in other cities, they've chosen like maybe 10 of the objective areas, 10 of those 44, or a number, or the ones that they want to work on that they haven't, and to really drill down and look at those and see and come up with, as a group of people, what can we do for, like, say, what can we do for infill, and have the people there at the table that would know what we have and how we can move forward. So we're kind of thinking of how to prioritize those, because it was over such a broad number of people and over so many things. How do you keep the momentum going to move forward in the areas, and who should be at the table? And it's like, I think now's the hard part. Yeah.
You're watching City Channel 4. On TV, online, on demand, on Facebook, and now on the go on your mobile device.